upon every Muslim? That's what a lot of people who have heard this hadith before, that's what they think. That's not the case. That's not what the ulama say about this hadith. Okay? Listen to the whole thing, because otherwise you'll get mad at me. Okay? Because you think I'm not talking about something, I'll talk about it in a minute. This hadith is not saying that. Because this hadith is saying what? Whoever wants to give a wasiyah. Whoever wants to give a wasiyah. Is wasiyah something wajib? The answer is no. It used to be wajib in the early phase of the Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed ayat in the Quran, such as in Surah Al-Baqarah, in which He says, كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين والأقربين بالمعروف حقا على المتقين. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made wasiyah wajib. He said whoever is going to leave behind a large amount of wealth, they have to have a wasiyah. This ayah was abrogated. Mansukh, the concept of naskh in the Quran. This is one of those ayat that was mansukh, that was abrogated by later ayat that were revealed. Which ayat? The ayat of Surah An-Nisa that I spoke about last week. The ayat at the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, on the first or second page of Surah An-Nisa, that mention clearly which of the relatives is going to get what fractions. That was not the case when this ayah was revealed. So at this point, when the first ayah was revealed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said what? That if you want to give away some of your wealth, if you are leaving behind a large amount of wealth, you have to give a wasiyah in which you're going to give a portion to your father, and a portion to your mother, and a portion to your brother, and a portion to your sister, whoever you want, however much you want, but you have to dictate that in a wasiyah before you die. Later on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that freedom away from us, and He clearly defined who's going to get how much from our close relatives in what is called mirath, that I spoke about last week. So I said that when it comes to mirath, who is going to inherit from me is not in my control. It was at this point. But then when the ayat of Surah An-Nisa were revealed, Allah took that away from us, and He designated who is going to be my heir and who is going to receive how much. Now, after that happened, the question is, does the concept of wasiyah still remain after the ayat of Surah An-Nisa? The answer is yes. But it is no longer a wajib. It is no longer wajib. It is something that is permissible. It is something that is permissible. In other words, if I don't want to have a wasiyah and I die, there's no sin on me. And what's going to happen to my wealth is going to be distributed among my heirs. Who are my heirs? Surah An-Nisa tells us. Who is going to get how much? Surah An-Nisa tells us. Okay, so it's already taken care of in the Sharia. But if I want to have a wasiyah, then I can bequeath, I can give wasiyah of up to 1/3 of my wealth, no more than 1/3, up to 1/3 of my wealth to people who are not my heirs. And this is something I talked about last week as well. Okay, so what is the ruling of wasiyah? It's not wajib. It's not required. It's something that is recommended. It is something that is recommended if somebody is leaving behind a large amount of wealth, and that somebody who's leaving behind a large amount of wealth, his heirs or her heirs are all wealthy. If I'm going to die and I have a lot of wealth and my heirs are all wealthy, then it is recommended for me to dedicate like up to 1/3 of my wealth to somebody other than my heirs. But if that is not the case, if I am not a wealthy person, I'm not leaving behind a lot of wealth, I'm only leaving behind a little bit of wealth, or my heirs are poor, they are in need, then according to the majority of the scholars, it is actually better that I don't leave behind a wasiyah. Why? Because if I leave behind a wasiyah, I'm going to be taking the share away from my heirs and giving it to somebody else. But if I'm leaving behind a little bit of money to begin with, then my heirs are more deserving of that. Who are my heirs? My children, my spouse, my parents, and others that I spoke about last week. They have more right over that. But if I'm leaving behind a lot of wealth and they are already taken care of, then up to 1/3 I can give away to others. Who are others? A relief organization, some charitable project, distant relatives, friends, distant family members, neighbors, acquaintances, even non-Muslims. I can give wasiyah to them. So, wasiyah is something that is not required, but it is something that is recommended if I am leaving behind a lot of wealth and my heirs are not poor. Otherwise, it's actually better that I don't leave behind a wasiyah and let all of my wealth be distributed among my heirs. And also, if I am going to leave behind a wasiyah, as I said, it should be less than 1/3. It cannot be more than 1/3. 1/3 is the maximum. In fact, the majority of the scholars, they said that it should be less than 1/3, like 1/4 or 1/5 or something like that. Again, to make sure that my heirs receive enough money. Now, going back to the hadith. By the way, I did mention this last time, but just so that those of you who are not there, this is an important point, so I'll mention it again. That I cannot give wasiyah to my heirs, those who already have a share according to the Quran, like my children, my wife, my parents, for example. I can't give extra, like in addition to that, in the form of wasiyah to, let's say, I feel like my daughter, she needs more money, so I'm going to give a wasiyah to her on top of what she's already going to get. I can't do that. I can't give a wasiyah to my heir unless all of my heirs give their consent. If all of my heirs give their consent, that it's okay with them, that I'm giving a little bit extra from my wasiyah portion to one of them at the exclusion of the rest. You see how they may not be willing to consent to this. If they give their consent voluntarily without any pressure, then and only then I can give wasiyah to one of my heirs. Okay? So now, going back to the hadith that I mentioned, the hadith said that whoever wants to give a wasiyah, then more than two nights should not pass without the person having it written down. The point here, as the ulama mentioned, is not that it be written down. That's not the point. The point is that things should not be left ambiguous. Right? So I was talking to my wife and I said, you know what? I feel like after I die, I want to give 1/3 of my wealth to my cousin. A very poor cousin who lives in a village in Pakistan. I want my money to go to them. And then I die. Are there any witnesses to this conversation that I had with my wife? No. No. No, I didn't say that I wanted to go to my cousins. I said I wanted to go to your brother, my brother-in-law, right? I wanted to go to your brother because your brother is so poor. My brother-in-law is not my heir. Now I've died. And my wife said, oh, my husband said 1/3 of his wealth is going to go to my brother. Who's going to believe her? It's a conflict of interest. It's her brother. Why did I leave things ambiguous? If I wanted that, I should have called witnesses or made a document so that things were left clear and not ambiguous. That's the point. That don't leave things ambiguous like that so that people are fighting after you die. People in your family are fighting after you die. No, leave things clearly demarcated. It doesn't have to be in writing. It could be in writing, or it could be you call your whole family, call witnesses and say, this is what I want. Everybody knows, everybody heard. Okay, now things are clear. So that's the point that the hadith is trying to make. That if you are going to leave behind a wasiyah, which may or may not be recommended, if you're going to leave behind a wasiyah, then make sure that it's known. Either you write it down or you call witnesses. Otherwise, you are going to leave trouble for your family members and you're going to be sinful for that. The last thing that I want to mention, everything that I said so far, I deliberately did not use the word will. I kept using the word wasiyah, 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 and I did not translate it as will. This, what I said so far, has nothing to do with the concept of will in this country. Should we have a will? The answer is yes. Yes. That has nothing to do with wasiyah. A will is a legal document that tells the government how I want my wealth to be distributed. If I don't leave behind a will, the government can potentially distribute my wealth not according to the Islamic guidelines of mirath. So if I want my wealth to be distributed according to the guidelines of mirath that are mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, then I should leave behind a will in which I mention that I want my wealth to be distributed according to the Islamic guidelines. Okay? I should not change the Islamic guidelines. I should not say in my will, I want my daughter to get 50% and my son to get 50%, because that's against the Sharia. I should not do that. But I should leave behind a will in which I say, I want my wealth to be distributed according to the Islamic guidelines, that I'm not going to try to change in this will. And then if there's wasiyah on top of those rules of mirath that I want to be applied, then I also mention that in that will. If I don't leave behind a will document, then potentially the government can distribute my wealth in a way that actually goes against the Shari'i way, and some of my wealth can even be taken away from my heirs. And you can consult lawyers, Muslim lawyers, who know this very well and who can actually help you make your will and final testament. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.